Well, hello, and welcome to the Pen to Publish podcast from the two Alexas. If you're penning and publishing, or even just planning to pen and publish, you're in the right place. I'm Alexa Whitten, author, typesetter, and independent publisher, and
I'm Alexa Tewksbury, author, editor, and proofreader. You can never have too many Alexas. We love getting feedback, so do please review and subscribe. And we also have a group full of like-minded writers, which you can join over on Facebook and get your writing results happening. It's called the Writers' Refinery, and the link will be in the show notes that accompany these podcasts. So let's get started.
Well, hi there, and it's episode 3 of the Pen to Publish podcast. Now, a little disclaimer about today's topic, which is getting your book ready for print and what your steps might be if you're trying to get a trad publishing deal as well. Now, as you know, Alexa and I specialise in self-publishing, and although Alexa One has had her books picked up by a trad publisher, we're not the experts in the trad route process. However, it's why we have people like Rachel Rowlands, who was on the show last series, and she has the experience of all things traditional publishing, and we can't wait to have her back for episode 8 of this series. However, having said all of that, it would be remiss of us if we didn't include some important info you need to make sure your book is ready for the next step. So you'll be listening mostly to Alexa One, thank goodness, as she guides us through those next critical steps, getting your book ready for the printing and publishing process.
I'm sure everyone loves listening to you.
I don't think so. My son would disagree, and I think my fiance would disagree as well. But there you go.
Well, they're all wrong. Right. So the very first thing to do before submitting your book to an agent or a publisher, or before self-publishing, is to get it professionally edited and proofread. Yes, it's an expense, but it's important to view that expense as an investment. Now, you're investing in the story that you want to tell, the story you've poured your heart and soul into. And in order to give it the very best chance of success, you need to be edited and proofread. Mm-hmm. And that goes for fiction and not fiction.
Yep. Definitely.
Now, I won't go into all the ins and outs of editing and proofreading here. Series 2 of this podcast is crammed full of tips and information about what editing and proofreading are and what they can do for your book. So do have a listen to those episodes if you're unsure about the editorial side of publishing. But basically, quick recap, editing is the vital smoothing out of your writing. That can only truly effectively be done by someone who isn't you. You can self-edit your book. You can get it to the best possible stage that you can before submitting to an editor, but then it does need that fresh eye. You know, an author has spent hours and hours, probably months of their life poring over their words, will be too close to that book to be able to make it the very best version of itself. So it needs the outside eye to pick it up by its bootstraps and really make it sing. It needs an editor. And we've said it before, even great, established, famous writers have editors because editing matters.
I mean, we bang on about this all the time, but it's probably the bit that scares writers the most. It's the bit where they have to let their baby go. And I understand that's scary. But even though the majority of our authors love what we do, you'll always get a few who just don't like the process. And unfortunately, their books suffer because of it. Remember this phrase, editors make your book better. They're not in the job of making it rubbish. I don't know why people resist. I don't know if it's the monetary thing. I don't know if it's the psychological thing, but anybody in life as well, feedback's important. And I think it takes a rather self-important person or naive person to think that their book, okay, they may have spent years writing, isn't going to be improved by an editor. But it is important to find the right match, for sure. So, yeah, no, I totally agree.
It's just really, really hard to be objective about your own book, about anything you've done. You know, if you've painted a beautiful picture, it's still going to be hard for you to be completely objective about it. Not that you would probably have your picture edited after painting it. I can't imagine that. But
well, you have art critics. You have food critics. They're almost like the editors. And I think for writing, like you said just previously, professional authors have editors. Look at any acknowledgements and you will see that they thank their editor. So anyway.
Yeah. So the editing part, that really matters.
Yeah.
And then proofreading is the very final stage. If you're self-publishing, you would generally hire a proofreader for your book after it's been laid out by a book designer to make sure, as far as humanly possible, that any remaining errors, typos, things that don't quite work in the layout are picked up. Now, I say as humanly possible because proofreaders are human. You've probably gathered that. But we can only work with our human eyes. So it's impossible to guarantee that we'll catch absolutely everything. We'll do our darndest to make sure your book shines with a professional finish, but no proofreader can absolutely guarantee with 100% that everything will get caught. It's a really tricky thing.
It's why I always tell my authors to read their book after it's been proofread, as there could be a few extra bits that need attention. There shouldn't be much, but editors and proofreaders, as you've said, are human. So it's good practice to self-edit at that stage as well. And also, you'll find traditionally published books have got errors in them. I find them all the time. In fact, I even read a book recently that was traditionally published and they got the character name wrong. And I read it about 8 times and I realized it was a typo. But anyway, so there you go.
Yeah, it's very easy.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if you're submitting to an agent or a publisher, I would also recommend having your TypeScript professionally proofread following the edit, so as to be as sure as you can be that you're not delivering something that contains very obvious errors. Now, if an agent agrees to read your TypeScript, you want to make the best impression possible, and pages full of obvious errors won't do that. So before self-publishing, hire a professional editor and proofreader. Before submitting to an agent, hire a professional editor and proofreader. Mm-hmm. As an author of a completed book, you will have done so much hard work already, and it would be awful to do yourself the disservice of skipping the final stages in the process. And Alexa, too, you as an independent publisher, I think you insist on your authors having an edit and a proofread.
I do. There are, of course, some who want to skip the step, but I've decided now, I think probably in the last year, decided to decline working with them. I used to take anybody, but I've become a lot more picky with what projects I take up because I'm that busy. I'm fortunate now to be able to do that. We had a book come to us just recently, didn't we, where the story just didn't make sense. We both read it and we were like, we don't know what this is, what they're even talking about. And I don't think they'd identified their target audience. And you basically returned it saying it needed a complete rewrite. I agreed. Sent back my feedback and your feedback. They've gone very quiet, but at the end of the day, it's our names on the title verso page. So yes, making sure books we produce, it's very important that they're good quality. Otherwise, our reputation is on the line, and we'd be doing our customers a disservice if we didn't make their book as the best it possibly could be.
And that book is a prime example of what I mean by being too close to it. You understand, as the writer, you know exactly what you're writing about. You know what you're talking about. If you've written it in an allegorical way, you know what you're talking about because it's come from you. Mm-hmm. But if when that third person, that third eye looks at it and thinks, hang on a minute, I don't quite understand, then your book isn't going to be any good to put out on the market to sell, because people aren't going to understand it. So that's a really good example of why the objective point of view is so important.
Yeah.
Right. So I've touched on what you need to do with your TypeScript before self-publishing or making a submission. And as I say, have a listen to series 2 for more of an in-depth look on that. But if you've decided to have a go at traditional route publishing, once your TypeScript is ready to send out, your next step is to put together a submission package to send to agents. Now, for a long time, submitting to an agent has been a far more realistic way to get your book in front of a publisher than submitting direct to a publisher.
I didn't think you could submit directly to a publisher.
Well, I think years and years ago you could, because I did years and years ago, back in the early 90s, in the 80s. Well, in fact, we didn't even have, I'm so old, we didn't even have the internet back then, did we? So it was sending hard copies through the post.
Right.
So you could look in the writer and artist yearbook, but you couldn't look online to see if they were accepting submissions. But you could send direct.
But we suggest you don't. now.
Yes, I think a lot of them now, if you look online, they say we don't accept
Yeah.
unsolicited submissions. So if it comes through an agent, they're far more likely to look at it.
Yeah.
So if an agent takes you on, they'll try to sell your book to a publisher. Now, the agent acts as the intermediary. They'll have contacts. They'll know which are the best publishers to approach for your particular book. But that said, getting an agent is incredibly tough, as we've said in previous episodes, but submitting to an agent is still the most accepted way forward for authors hoping to become traditionally published. I think, if you can track down agents who have really good publishing contacts and who have track records in selling books to publishers, they're the type of agent definitely to look out for. Look for the track record.
Yeah.
So I would suggest submitting to perhaps 5, maybe up to 10 agents in your first round of submissions. And this is where some research comes in. Now, the Writers and Artists Yearbook is updated annually with details of agents and publishers. So have a look, see what kind of books different agents are representing. The information is all there in the yearbook. Then make a list of the ones who would be interested in your genre of book. And you will see that many literary agencies represent different types of books. So be careful and just make sure that if you write children's fiction, for example, you don't submit to an agency that only produces cookery books. Sending your book to the right place is easy enough to do. Just make sure you do the research.
Yeah, Rachel also gave some great tips in episode 8 of the last series. So go and re-listen to that. Plus, if you've got any questions, do get in touch with us, because we can always ask her directly. Or if you're in the Writers Refinery Facebook group, you'll see that she's a member too. So, it's not what you know, it's who you know, just saying. So do come and join the Facebook group if you haven't already.
Yeah, link in the show notes.
Yes.
You can also find out about agents on Twitter. What books are they tweeting about? Have they stated in their profile what they're looking for? Sometimes I will see tweets from agents where they say, I'm currently accepting submissions. So it's worth keeping an eye and look at their social media. Do you think they would like your book? In the yearbook as well, the Writers and Artists Yearbook, you'll also find really helpful articles on writing and making submissions. So it's well worth getting your hands on a copy of that. For the submission itself, there are lots of places to look online that will guide you on the content of the submission, but the crucial things that you will need to write to go with your TypeScript are the synopsis of your book and a query letter. Now, I've talked before about the back blurb for the back cover of your book. The synopsis you send to an agent isn't like the blurb you get on the back cover of a book. It's not a teaser like a film trailer. The synopsis has to tell the entire story, including what happens at the end. So you don't want to hold anything back. But this is so that the agent can get a proper feel for the book to help them decide whether it's worth their time reading it. Now, writing a synopsis is hard. Your book may run to many thousands of words, and you'll be being asked to condense your story down to 1 or 2 pages of text. And not just the plot line, you'll also need to get some character development in there. The agent will want to get an idea of not just what the book is about, but who is it about? Are the main characters engaging? What kind of journey are they on?
Yeah, and I think if you remember, we helped Jennifer, didn't we? She wanted to get her book trad published, and she was approaching agents, and I think she came to you, I think, more for advice on how to write the letter, which you weren't able to help her with. But I think she found that process incredibly difficult, to condense her story into the page count that the agents were wanting. And I would imagine some agents might want 1 page, some agents might want 2 pages. You have to do your research. Don't just think that you do 1 synopsis and it might not fit all agents. So really do be careful with your research, what the agents require. Some might even want a word count. I don't know. You need to do your research, right, Alexa? Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah. The research is vital in all aspects of this submission.
Yeah.
The research into what they want, who they are, what they're looking for, what kind of books. It's all really, really vital.
Yeah.
But although this sounds like a huge hurdle, writing a synopsis, and I know it does, and it's a huge thing to be able to condense your book down, to be what they're looking for. For you lovely listeners of this podcast, I've compiled a few online links with some brilliant advice on how to write a captivating synopsis that includes all the elements needed. And these posts, they're really clearly written by people who know what they're talking about. So you'll find the links in the show notes, and do have a look at the tips shared if you're getting towards the stage of needing to produce a synopsis for your book. They won't do the work for you, but they really will guide you as to what to include. By the way, before making a start on the synopsis, this is again just going back on this, always check with each individual agent you're submitting to see what those requirements are. There may even be some who don't require a synopsis. They may look at your letter, what you how you sum the book up in the letter. They may like the sound of it. They may just want to see a few chapters. So just do check. There's also what you actually send. Some might want to see the whole book. Quite often it is just the first 3 chapters that you send. And I did read, actually, I read that if you're asked to send the first 3 chapters, but your immediate thought is, oh, but the first 3 chapters aren't as good as chapter 7, 12, and 27, then you really need to go back and look at your first 3 chapters, because your first 3 chapters are the gateway to your book. And I would imagine that, if somebody reading your book, if they're not grabbed within the first couple of chapters, even, they're not going to carry on till that brilliant chapter 27. So if that's your first reaction, oh gosh, those later chapters are much better, I wish I could send those, just go back into those first 3 chapters and see how you can improve them, how you can make them as good as those later chapters. So just make sure that you've got exactly what you need, that you've adhered to the format that's required before you hit send with your submission package.
Yes, and they might require that your first 3 chapters, for instance, have been laid out specifically in Word at certain margins, certain line spacing, certain typeface even. So it is really important that you know exactly what they're asking of you. They might want a cover letter, they might want a synopsis, they might want 3 chapters, and each one of those will have their own definitions of what you need to be sending. So don't try and be clever and send a typeset version PDF if they've asked for a Word version set out in 12-point Courier at 1.5 line spacing. Now, that's not to say you can't be clever with how you send your book in. For instance, there's nothing stopping you from sending it in a way that will catch their attention. People sending book cakes to an agent, or muffins. Now, you're not breaking the rules because you're not making your physical submissions different, but there's nothing to say you can't send them in a different way. Now, I'm not saying this is what you should do, but I'm just saying I have heard stories of people that have got the attention of the agent. Because if you can imagine, some agents might be getting 25 submissions a day. So, have a little think. You can send other things along with it, maybe like a tea bag and a biscuit, and say, enjoy this cuppa on me while you're reading my book. Just a thought.
I like that idea. I proofread a catalogue a few years ago from a local company, and it was a bird spike company, bird spikes to protect gutters and roofs and lamps and things like that. And they sent me a box of fudge and a mug it was a hard copy that I was working on, and they sent this whole thing, and they said, have a cup of tea, have some fudge while you're doing your proofreading. And I thought, well, thank you very much.
Exactly.
So, right, now the query letter, or the pitch letter, sometimes called. Now, again, there are lots of posts online about how to write this, and you'll find another couple of really useful links in the show notes to help you with putting your query letter together. The Writers and Artists Yearbook is also more than likely to offer help with this. Now, I say more than likely, I haven't seen a 2023 edition yet, but when I was putting this episode together, I was looking at a 2020 edition, and it even includes a sample letter. So it's a very valuable place to look, because these articles are written by authors and agents. Your query letter is something that you really do want to spend some time over. Start by using the agent's name. Address the agent by their name. This shows that you've bothered to look them up. You've taken the time to find out who this person is that you're pitching to. I think, dear sir / madam, that would just be a terrible mistake. Use their name, their first name. Let them know why you've chosen them to send your book to. I think it's respectful, it's warm, it's human, and it shows that you value them particularly for their possible input. And then keep your letter brief and to the point. Along with your synopsis, this is your chance to instill enough interest in your book to get it read by someone who maybe, just maybe, can find you a publisher. So you don't want to regurgitate your synopsis. That's a separate document. For your letter, you want to come up with something that's punchy and snappy, something that sums up your book in a couple of sentences. And I've actually heard that for your book, it's quite a good idea anyway, even when you're in the early stages of planning, just to be able to sum it up like that, because that gives you, that's the kind of heart of what your book is all about. And you can always go back to that if you start to flounder at any point in the writing. And then in your letter, you want to include a little bit about yourself too. Again, not all about your great aunt Mary or Uncle Arthur, but just something short, snappy, and relevant to your submission. As I say, do have a look at the links for a breakdown of what to include. That's in the synopsis and in the query letter, and what not to include. That's very important. Everything has to be relevant in that query letter. And a final thing, I would strongly advise, here I go again, that you get your synopsis and your query letter proofread. So as with the typescript of your book, you're out to make the best impression you can. So you really don't want either of those documents to have mistakes in them. Particularly pay special attention if the agent has a name that you've not come across before. Just make sure you spell it right.
Yeah, definitely.
It sounds obvious, but it's so easy in the rush to sort of send something off to get something like that wrong. You
did this for one of our clients, the one that we mentioned earlier, didn't you?
Gosh, yes.
Could you imagine sending a letter and it was really badly written or full of typos? Oh my goodness, that'd be awful.
No, it's you just know that you've killed your chance.
Well,
Stone dead. Your book might be brilliant, but if the surrounding stuff isn't right, it's not even going to be looked at.
And I'll also just say, make sure you get the name right. I hate it when people shorten my name to Alex. I just don't like it. Or Alexis gets my backup.
Yeah, Alexia, I get often.
If I get Alexis, seriously, I don't even want to reply to the email because they haven't done their research. So make sure you get the name right. So I think to wrap up, what we've talked about is getting your book ready for publication, which basically means getting it ready to sell or to print. You need the book edited, proofread, and in the best possible shape. You need to make sure if you're self-publishing that your book blurb is also in good shape as well. Alexa, I know that you spend some time with book blurb because it's really important to make sure that that's all ready and that you've got a compelling strapline on your cover as well for a fiction book. Because you're going to be doing this all yourself, this is something that you need to think about. So for self-publishing, make sure your book is ready to go. That means the inside, and spend just as much time on the cover, title, strapline, and book blurb as well. Now, we talk about all of that in earlier series, so do go and find those. Everything for this episode. And next week, we're going to be looking at the printing options. So this is obviously for self-published authors. So we're going to be showing you how to get your book ready for print in terms of a little bit more about layout again, and also what it means in terms of choice. So paper type, cover choice, cover finish, spine size, all of those things that you need to consider when you're getting your book printed. So that's everything from me.
And that's everything from me.
And we'll speak to you very soon. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.